Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska weather with us on the 17th of October. As always, we encourage you and your community to stay up to date on your local weather information, and we provide a lot of ways for you to be able to access everything we've been working so hard on each day, 24 hours a day, all around Alaska. The Alaska Weather Information Line is 1-800-472-0391. You can access that with a touch-tone phone and simply dial in your forecast numbers there. If you listen to it for the first time, write down those numbers that you're using, and you can go back and do it a lot faster next time. Weather.gov/Alaska is how you find us online. If you're using your mobile device, say you're walking around AFN this week and you're saying, oh, I sure like to check the forecast for Fairbanks, type in mobile.weather.gov, mobile.weather.gov, and that brings up a really fast-loading web page. You can type in Fairbanks, AK at the top, hit go, and then the forecast will pop up in a really fast-loading way for your phone. You can save it to your home screen and come back to it, and it will act just like a weather app. And it's your personal weather app. You set it up the way you want. Weather.gov/Alaska is how you find our big site. Everything that you need there and everything that we'll talk about on the show lives on that site. You can find the weather graphics from the show on there any time of the day. Early in the morning, we start to take a few of those away so they don't conflict with any of the new information that we're sending out from our Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, the River Forecast Center, or of course any of your weather forecast offices in Juneau, Fairbanks, or here in Anchorage. If at any time you can't find what you're looking for, I'm happy to talk to you. I'd love to see your pictures of your community around your part of Alaska. Maybe we'll even feature here on the show. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is how you find me anytime. Now, as we look at the current weather situation around Alaska, we always like to start with our hazards, and these are things that might be causing trouble. They're alerts that we can paint on the map and say, hey, this is a spot we want you to keep track of here. And in this case tonight, a flood advisory is still in effect for areas around Ketchikan, specifically around the Ward Lake area. They've had about another inch of rain in the last 24 hours. The good news is that a lot of that heavier rainfall seems to have passed through. However, it is still raining and compounding the problem where we're seeing some elevated water around the Ward Lake area and some water over some of the local trails there. So be extra careful there. Flood advisory remains in effect. It does look like we will be seeing a trend toward slightly less rainy weather. Not dry weather yet, but less rainy as we go into the next couple of days there. So for now, a flood advisory is still in effect. Yesterday we were talking about the drought monitor and saying that recent rains have improved the drought situation across many parts of southeastern Alaska and south central for that matter. Here's the drought scale. So right now we don't have extreme drought on the map anymore. Everything that we see here is at least D2 and you can see this is still listed as severe drought. So anywhere from about Petersburg down toward Ketchikan and Craig and Klawock included in that, north of Port Alexander all the way up towards Glacier Bay and just about to Juneau. Everything there is listed as D0, abnormally dry, and that continues all the way into Prince William Sound, parts of the Susitna Valley, parts of the Kenai Peninsula, say for the Forelands. And this area is just the beginning stages of dry or drought, but in between, from just north of Juneau all the way down toward the Petersburg area in Wrangell, we're still talking about D1 or moderate drought. The issue for Southeast is that this is a long-term drought situation. You didn't just have one summer with dry weather. You've had several summers and many months of unusually drier weather that's compounded this problem. So just because you're getting rain now or at the appropriate time of the season doesn't make that all just magically go away. It is a problem that is slow to eradicate and eventually will probably improve if we keep this up, but again, it doesn't just go away overnight. So even though there is flooding, minor flooding around the Ketchikan area and Ward Lake tonight, it is not the end of the drought just yet. So we're getting there. And like I said, you can see that minor drought or that low-end drought extends all the way into the Susitna Valley, the Kenai Peninsula, and the Forelands. Forelands are still listed as D2, and that would include the Sterling Highway area and points northward into Anchorage. And then you can see that we're still holding on to that severe drought listed as D2 on the drought monitor for all of Kodiak Island. So what? What does that mean to you? Well, that's what we'd like to know. We don't know what that means to you. We do know of water shortages that we've had this season. And we do know that, you know, some things haven't grown just right. Maybe you're seeing a trend in where the animals are or where they have not been based on maybe what you think is a drought condition. We don't know. Drought is unusual in Alaska, and at least in our perspective, right? So what we would like to do is collect that information, and the folks there at the University of Lincoln, Nebraska, droughtreporter.unl.edu.map, would like to know more about what you've experienced with drought here in Alaska. This helps them, and this helps them help us do a better job saying, hey, the long-term view of this could include some of these things that you've seen the last time we saw drought. So your report makes a huge difference the next time this happens. It will really, really help. So droughtreporter.unl.edu/map. If you just want to look at the drought monitor, just type in drought monitor in your favorite search engine there, and it will take you there real quick. UNL drought monitor. Here is a look at satellite picture for today. Areas of low pressure, 1, 2, 3, 4, lined up, just pinwheeling there, and certainly not anything really pretty compared to their former selves. This thing right here, this beautiful spiral sitting out in the middle of the Bering Sea, used to be Super Typhoon Hagibis. It is not that exciting anymore. There's not a whole lot to look at. However, it is shifting the winds around and grabbing onto chunks of moisture in each one of these, slinging moisture out ahead of it, some of that working through southeast, some of that working into the northern Gulf, some of that working into the Alaska Peninsula and parts of Bristol Bay, and then we've got Hagibis just out there not doing much except making the seas choppy, so hopefully you're not trying to get through there. The overall flow on the north side of this is from east to west, a very continental, very summer-like flow, and that is dragging clouds out of Canada. The south side is much warmer and much wetter, and all of that is pointing toward the Pacific Northwest. So right now we have low pressure across the northern Gulf, 979 millibars there, a weak area of low pressure south of southeast, one over the Bristol Bay area at 980, and there is 983, former remnant Super Typhoon Hagibis, a measly 983 millibars. Dry weather across the western interior right now. Some light snow showers passing through some parts just west of Fairbanks and to the south. For tonight, won't be surprised to see some light snow in the region, but it really doesn't look like it's going to amount to much. For parts of the Susitna Valley, areas of light snow mainly up against the mountains and west of the parks. We'll see a rain-snow mix around parts of Prince William Sound. Scattered areas of generally lighter rainfall across southeast. Higher terrain could be looking at some snow showers, and you might see a little bit of a rain-snow mix in northern parts of the Panhandle. Conditions do look to be IFR there the next couple days around your favorite passes. Out west, showers moving through the chain with waves of low pressure passing through. The winds will switch around in the western chain. A trough of low pressure pulls off of the Alaska Peninsula and into low pressure across the northern Gulf. As that moisture is moving into the coastal areas, don't be surprised to see rain and snow, especially in the morning there, as conditions are a little bit cooler as the day heats up. Chances are that's going to be cool, cloudy, and wet weather for you. Around southeast, it looks like showers will be off and on, not much of a threat for snow at the lower terrain. High pressure up to the north sets up across the north slope, and that could trap in some low clouds and fog for many around the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seacoast. Looks like things will be pretty quiet across the western interior, and for many, as you'll see in the aviation maps coming up here in just a few minutes, likely VFR flying in many locations, especially west of the Parks Highway and especially north and south there of the Yukon Delta and probably west of the Koyukon. As we get into your Saturday, that high pressure system doesn't really strengthen too much, kind of sits in place, and that means those low clouds and that area of fog across the north might sit in the same old place as well. All of these little waves of low pressure aren't moving very quickly. They all seem to be trapped on the north side of the jet stream again, which we'll show to you in just a minute, but that's well south of Alaska. And those little areas of low pressure are just kind of sitting and spinning and doing their own thing. If they get close to one another, they kind of zip each other around. But really no form or function to all those. They're just grabbing onto moisture and holding kind of close to Alaska water. So we have a 990 low sitting out in the middle of the Bering. It's got some light showers and clouds and maybe some fog with it. Low pressure across the northern Gulf for Saturday. And again, that onshore flow moving through southeast, some scattered areas of light rain perhaps. And around Prince William Sound, wet weather will continue there. It looks generally dry for the Cook Inlet region, but all around there, including the mountains and especially the mountains, pockets of rain and snow will be possible as we go through Saturday. A better chance for some light snow across the Alaska range as usual as we go through your Saturday. So generally unsettled for most of Alaska as we go into the weekend, generally dry for the west coast and parts of the western interior, and more clouds than snow across the central and eastern interior heading into Saturday. Here's your low temperatures in the morning for southeast. Looks fairly mild, 30s and 40s. Sitka looking at 44. Haines and Skagway in the mid-30s, Yakutat 36, about the same as what you'll find in Cordova. Around Cook Inlet, look for temperatures holding close to freezing, 38 in Kodiak. Southwest, you're looking at temperatures in the upper 20s and lower 30s. In Fairbanks for AFN, you'll wake up to a brisk 21 degrees. It could be colder, and it is around Eagle at 18, 11 for Arctic Village. Low to mid-20s for most of the Beaufort Seacoast, 30 around Utqiagvik, 28 down the road in Wainwright. 20s and 30s for the Kotzebue Sound region. Norton Sound, Unalakleet, you're looking at 23 in the morning, 25 in Nome, 33 there by the afternoon tomorrow. Lower 30s for most of the North Slope. It gets a little bit warmer as you head out to Wainwright. Around Demonic, all the way down to Macoriac and up to Bethel. Temps in the mid-30s, maybe even 40 degrees if you're close to the coast. 38 around Gamble and Savunga, 44 in St. Paul, 40s and 50s for Southeast. Looks like Sandpoint could reach 48. As we get into Saturday morning, upper 30s and lower 40s for most of the Panhandle there. Once again, Wrangell, Craig, Cape, Klawock, all looking at temperatures that are very close to that 40-degree mark. About 36 in Valdez, mid-30s for the Cook Inlet region, Homer 31. 22 in Northway, about 20 for North Pole, out toward areas closer to the Tote Cutoff. 21 in Tanana, Ambler 20, a little bit cooler in Bettles at 18. 8 for Anaktuvuk Pass, and teens and 20s for the North Slope. Most areas will be well below freezing. Kotzebue, you're looking at 27, 32 in Shish, and about 22 in Bethel as we go into the morning. By the afternoon, temps generally north of the Yukon Valley will be below freezing through the afternoon, teens and 20s there. Looks like Kaktovik could rise to 34 degrees, 35 in Nome, 37 in Shish. Southwest, most of our villages there in the mid to upper 30s, lower 40s. Lake Iliamna 43, 47 in Kodiak, 40s and 50s for Southeast. Looks like Gulkana could see temps in the mid 30s there, and parts of the central and eastern chain will hold in the mid to upper 40s. Shemya 44. Here's a look at the climate outlook for the 8 to 14-day period ending at the end of the month. Warmer than normal conditions are more likely, especially across south central and southwest, and wetter than average conditions possible for the central and east.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation weather now. Convection will be possible across the Gulf of Alaska as we still have that very broad trough of low pressure all the way from the Bering into the Gulf. This will become the more active area in the next 24 hours. We'll still have marginal conditions across most of southeast, IFR conditions across the higher terrain. Areas in the upper Tanana Valley and just north of the Chugach. We'll continue to see IFR in the morning and watch for hit and miss MVFR across the eastern interior and all along the northern coast and into parts of the North Slope right up against the Brooks Range. Across the west coast, watch for marginal conditions there through the Bering Strait. And through the central and western Bering there, hit and miss marginal conditions with a wide swath of VFR from the Pribilofs all the way down to Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula. We'll see that fill in a little bit in the afternoon, though, as that next wave of low pressure rotates in. All of these are fairly weak, none of them horribly well organized, but that overall trough of low pressure just keeps a lot of the slopping up into your part of the neighborhood there. For southeast, we expect to see marginal conditions. IFR lingers around parts of Glacier Bay and Haines and Skagway, likely looking at lower decks, if not IFR, through most of the day. A look for marginal conditions across the eastern interior, a widespread area of VFR through the upper Koyukuk, through the middle Yukon, and into looks like the Susitna Valley, most of the Kenai and Kodiak, so good news there. Saturday morning, watch for IFR to return across the upper parts of the Copper River Basin, the Chugach, and into Tanita Pass, probably Mentasta Pass. Marginal conditions through Prince William Sound and the Kenai, and really most of southeast. Again, watch for convection across the eastern Gulf to continue. Marginal levels across the North Slope all the way down the west coast and through the eastern chain and the Alaska Peninsula. Way out west again, marginal levels continue. You can see some breaks forming, a possible period during the day on Saturday where the Pribilofs will see VFR conditions, and that could extend southward toward the central and eastern Aleutians, Adak, Atka, Nikolsky, Unalaska, all looking at least good through a part of the day. North of the Brooks Range, watch for VFR. MVFR could be very close to Point Barrow, and really most of the interior will be dealing at least with some level of marginal conditions throughout the afternoon. Look for improvement, though, in southeast, so something to watch for. Here's your pass conditions now for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass. We expect to see VFR flying through most of your day tomorrow. VFR leaning over toward marginal conditions for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. Rainy Pass looks to be marginal throughout most of the day. Windy Pass should see improvement as we go through your Friday. Isabel Pass looks to be marginal most of the period. Mentasta Pass will start at IFR. We expect to see marginal transitions and improvements as we go. Tanita Pass looks for VFR developing by the afternoon. Portage Pass will lean the other way over into marginal conditions as we get into your Friday afternoon. And Chilkoot and White Pass, rain mixed with snow in the area. It looks like IFR for you on Friday. Surface freezing line continues to hug the southern coast and the west coast north of the Bering Strait, though, for Friday morning and right over Haines, Skagway, and for Juneau. But the 2,000-foot line holding just above it there. So as you can see, if one is just to the south of the other, that presents a little bit of a problem for mixed precipitation and maybe some overrunning. So places to watch for that would be around the Chugach, perhaps around southwest, and maybe at times right here around southeast. Again, so watch for some of that mixed precipitation. The 4,000-foot freezing line way down to the south here, so it looks like things are going to be fairly cold for most places on Friday morning. Icing potential generally running above 5,000 feet for the eastern interior, a little bit lower in a few pockets there. One of those could be over northern parts of southeast, anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Watch for convection again across the eastern interior, and anywhere near that, as always, the rule is that could imply severe icing potential in the vicinity of any convection. Around 4,000 to 5,000 feet across the Bering, watch for widespread isolated moderate all the way from just south of St. Lawrence Island into the central and eastern Aleutians. Here's the jet stream now, and look at this huge trough carved out across the Bering, anywhere from 100 to 150 knots, coming in almost due west and slamming all of that moisture into the Pacific Northwest where it belongs for the season. High pressure working its way in from north and east, dragging in a faster little jet streak there, around 60 knots over the Brooks Range. You can see that at 9,000 feet, a broad easterly flow, sometimes up to 20 knots at this level. More of a north and northwesterly flow coming into the Aleutians, and a broad westerly flow working its way into and around low pressure sitting across the northern Gulf. Wind speeds there 20 to 45. 40-knot winds sustained across most of the Gulf here at 3,000 feet. Again, our low pressure system in the same old spot. Easterly flow coming in out of western Canada, 10 to 25 knots, 30 knots across the north slope, and several waves of low pressure across the Bering. The overall flow again in that clockwise or counterclockwise fashion, bringing unsettled weather to the west coast as we go. So turbulence potentials generally across the Alaska Peninsula and the chain below 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Some bumps there across the northern Gulf and across the Yukon Valley. Watch for convection again across the eastern Gulf.
Legends of the Fall.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky tonight. The ancient stargazers had a lot of imagination.
When they looked at the stars, they connected the dots and pictured people, animals, rivers, and even entire scenes.
And in the fall evening sky, if you have an ancient imagination, you can see a king and a queen,
A prince and a princess,
two monsters, and
a flying horse.
it's gonna get crowded up there, but we can walk you through it.
Okay, we have our sky set up for 9 p.m. facing northeast. About halfway up in the sky, you'll find the 5 familiar stars that look like a letter W.
This is the beautiful Queen Cassiopeia. Now, stretch your imaginations a little and see if you can make out a Queen of Ethiopia sitting very properly on her throne.
Sorry, I guess I don't have that much imagination. But once you find her, she is the central character of our story.
Legend has it that Cassiopeia bragged about her beauty way too much. In fact, one day she said, now get this, she said, "I'm more beautiful than all the mermaids in the ocean."
Yikes. That got Poseidon, the god of the sea, super mad. He confronted Cassiopeia's husband, King Cepheus, whose 5 fainter stars are up and to the left of his wife. The stars look like an upside-down house.
For insulting the gods, Cassiopeia had to give up her one and only daughter, the Princess Andromeda, as a sacrifice. Basically, they had to chain Andromeda to a big rock in the ocean and let Poseidon's pet sea monster eat her.
You can find Andromeda to the right of Cassiopeia. Her stars look more like a skinny letter A.
A for Andromeda.
Exactly. Andromeda also houses the closest spiral galaxy to our Milky Way. It's called the Andromeda Galaxy because you can find it near her right hip star. Of course, if you live in a light polluted area, you won't be able to see this galaxy. However, if you're out in the country, you might see it looking like a little cloud, barely visible to the naked eye.
With binoculars, you can resolve a lot more of its cloudy nature, and with a telescope, you can see it as a long, fuzzy blur. This is a galaxy with 1 trillion stars that you can't see with the naked eye. Wow, space is scary big.
Now, before the sea monster makes his appearance, we must introduce our hero, Perseus. As the story goes, Perseus that very morning slew the wicked Gorgon Medusa.
She's the one with snakes for hair and turns you to stone with just one look.
Looking at her with the reflection in his shield, Perseus chopped off her head, then put the head in a bag for safekeeping.
Later that afternoon, as he was flying through the air on his winged sandals, with the infamous bag at his side, Perseus happened to spy a young maiden in distress.
Our Princess Andromeda. Now we're facing east at 10 p.m. and Perseus appears on the scene. You can find him as a squiggle of stars below Andromeda's feet.
The sea monster, a constellation named Cetus, is just rising in the east-southeast. I think his stars look like a recliner chair.
That doesn't seem so scary.
Anyway, Perseus yells to Andromeda, "Close your eyes!" Then he closes his eyes, reaches into the bag and pulls out Medusa's severed head, shows it to the sea monster who takes one look at it and poof, turns to stone.
Perseus saves the day. Wow, what a starry story. A king, a queen, a prince and a princess, 2 monsters, and oops, we forgot the flying horse.
Oh yeah, Pegasus was supposedly born from this epic battle, as Perseus held out Medusa's head. Now, this is totally gross. Some of her blood fell into the water and turned magically into Pegasus the flying horse.
Oh, come on, that is too weird.
Agreed, but that's the kind of imagination we're dealing with when we learn about the constellations and when you
Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your sea ice edge here for the 17th of October. We're still seeing some minor growth along coastal areas, mainly inside of the barrier islands and in some of the lagoons there. Very minor concentrations in some of those places, again, south of the barrier islands there around the Seward Peninsula as well. Nothing south of the Bering Strait just yet. So we continue to see new ice growth along the higher concentrations ice. Again, we apologize for the lack of the normal view that we have. We've been updating the sea ice computers there, and we're still working on a fix to get things back to where they once were. So more to come, but anytime you want to see this image, you can do so heading to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On the southeast now, south and easterly winds coming up the inside passage, northerlies through the Lynn Canal, 15 knots and 3-foot seas. There's 7-foot seas inside of the Clarence Strait, a little bit on the stronger side. South and westerly flow coming up the outer coast, 20 to 25. You're looking at 15 to 17-foot seas. For tomorrow, that should diminish a little bit with southerly winds continuing all the way up to Cross Sound. Easterlies off of Yakutat and Icy Cape. South and easterlies diminish inside 10 knots and 2-foot seas. They're still looking at a north wind in the Lynn Canal. And seas holding around 12 to 13 feet there across the outer coast on Saturday. For South Central, light winds and small seas for the most part. For Cook Inlet, 10 knots, 2-foot seas there. Northwesterlies over the Barrens, 7 to 8-foot seas. Northerlies around the Prince William Sound area. Northeasterlies coming out of Cordova and off the Northern Gulf, anywhere from 10 to as much as 25 knots with seas jumping up to about 7 to 10 feet there on Friday. That diminishes with the stronger easterly flow, 10 to 15 knots. Light winds inside of the Sound, 10 knots, 2-foot seas. And northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet to get a little bit more of a breeze across the Barrens with a 3 to 7-foot sea. For Friday, west and northwesterly winds coming across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, 20 to 30 knots over the island itself. Looking for 5-foot seas inside of Chillicothe, 13-foot seas on the Gulf side, 13 to 15-foot seas as you head down the Alaska Peninsula. Waters Sandpoint looking at a 30-knot wind from the west. And that westerly wind cuts into the Bering Seacoast as well, 20 to 25 with a 7 to 10-foot sea on Friday. A little bit more of an easterly flow moving across Bristol Bay tomorrow, Saturday I should say, 20 knots and 4-foot seas. West and southwesterly winds coming up the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula, 20 to 30, and then lighter winds around Kodiak Island. Shelikof Strait, though, still looking at 3-foot seas on that 10-knot wind. For Friday, across the chain, 15 to 20 knots will prevail, generally from the west and northwest. A little bit more of a southwesterly flow from Nikolsky to Unalaska. 10 to 11 foot seas there on Friday. By Saturday, winds still holding around 15 to 25. A little bit of a stronger wind north of Unalaska and Nikolsky. 30 knots on the south side, 8 foot seas there, and west and northwesterlies coming in. All of this rotating around a very broad area of low pressure around the Bering. And again, that's about as strong as it gets. South and easterly winds moving off of the regions north of Etoll and Strait and the Yukon Delta, 15 knots, 5 foot seas there. Easterlies over St. Matthew up to 20. Southwesterlies for St. Paul and St. George, 9 foot seas there. Northerlies, though, out of the Kuskokwim Delta, 20 knots with a 7 foot sea. Light winds in Norton Sound as well. Those come up to about 10 knots on Saturday. 2 foot seas expected with an east and northeasterly wind south of St. Lawrence Island and an easterly wind blowing out of Quinnipiac and Togiak as well. Easterlies there at 25 knots, 5 foot seas. Look for a southwest wind around St. Paul and St. George again. Once all this is rotating around, area of low pressure sitting around the Bering. So nothing terribly strong there, but a little bit blusterier on the east side. For the Beaufort, we're looking at easterlies 30 to 35, a brisk wind right along and just north of the coast, expecting 11 to 12 foot seas there. That will keep ice from forming with stronger winds like that. East and southeasterlies around Point Hope all the way into Kotzebue Sound, 10 to 15 knots and 3 to 6 foot seas. You'll see very little change in the wind across the Beaufort seacoast as we go through your Saturday. Still looking at 11 to 12 foot seas in some cases, more likely 10 around Ukqiavik, and then south and west expect 3 to about 8 foot seas into the Chukchi coast, 15 knots from the south and east outside of Kotzebue Sound on Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather, a very broad area of low pressure sitting across the Bering. That's what's stirring up those west and southwesterly winds over the Aleutians. And we have high pressure sitting across the North Slope, but it's not enough to calm the winds over the Beaufort. In fact, a pretty broad and brisk flow from east to west is moving across the North Slope, generally north of the Brooks Range. Expect that to continue into the weekend. And low pressure sitting across the northern Gulf. Light winds probably not seen until you get out west of the Alaska Range, but over the Gulf, choppy conditions and moisture moving its way into southeast will keep rain showers going there and perhaps a rain and snow mix around the Lynn Canal, generally around Haines and Skagway and up into the higher terrain. For South Central, watch for snow over the higher terrain for the next several days. Most areas in the lower levels will be fairly dry. Low pressure sits in the same old spot and it could be a little choppy outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance and across the northern Gulf, where rain and snow showers will mainly focus on some of the coastal areas, and unsettled weather continues out in the west with cold weather up north. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.